everyone, it's Emily Fox. Today's video is going to be a video that's going to be a little bit different. It's kind of a recommendation video, kind of letting you know which book I'm planning on reading. All in one, I wanted to share some books that have a great first sentence, which is kind of one of the ways to make me want to read your book. I feel like some monsters will go back and read the last page or the last sentence, which I don't even want to talk about it. But some people like me like to read the first page or, the first sentence. And I love when they just grip me. It just makes me want to read them. So I chose 10 books. 3 of them I haven't read yet, but the other ones I will be giving you a little bit of a review part 2. And yeah, just talk about it for fun. So I feel like there are some very famous first quote, like for example, Pride and Prejudice. I feel like everyone knows that quote. So I will not be including those books in here because I wanted to make it a little bit more different and just give you more recommendation. I've actually been wanting to do this for a little while. And the book that reminded me that you needed to do this is this one, which is To Be Thought Unfortunate by Becky Chambers. I gave this book 5 stars, which I don't do often, so that's why I really wanted to talk about it again. Let me actually start by reading the first sentence before I forget. It starts by saying, please read this, but the first sentence is actually, if you read nothing else we've sent home, please at least read this. So this book follows 4 different characters that are sent to a different solar system. They're actually going to go on 1 moon and 3 different planets to test and see if there are any form of lives there and just send back the data to humanity. And it starts that way, kind of letting you know something happened, but you don't know what. You have to read the whole book, which is actually pretty short. It's 140 pages to figure it out. It's weirdly wholesome. She tends to write sci-fi. I don't know if she wrote anything else, actually. I've read 4 books by her, and they're all sci-fi. They're all really wholesome, character-driven stories that have great representation, which is also the case in here. There are 4 characters, and even though they don't really label themselves, there's a trans man, asexual, bisexual, and lesbian women that you're following. Her books always kind of feel like home to me. I don't know how else to explain it. It just feels very nice, and there's actually more science in this one than the past ones that I've read by her, and it's really well explained. I feel like it's very accessible to anyone, but at the same time, she kind of makes fun of it. Sorry, there's a huge squirrel in my backyard. I had not seen Steve in a while, but it's very accessible. The author kind of makes fun of it a little bit also by saying like, oh, some people will skip ahead type of thing, but I feel like it's still very beginner friendly, and I just really enjoyed that book. Again, I gave it 5 stars. I don't do this super often, but I feel like for people that aren't super into sci-fi, her books are a great way to get into it. So if you like these type of stories, I definitely highly recommend this one. And again, the first sentence definitely made me very excited to read it. I think the most popular books, most famous book in this video is this one, so let's do this. The Martian by Andy Weir. I feel like a lot of people have seen the movie, but the book starts by saying, I'm pretty much fucked, which I did actually read the book before I watched the movie, and that definitely intrigued me quite a bit. It kind of sets the tone also for the story. It's also sci-fi. I'm realizing there are quite a few in here, which nobody's actually surprised. I feel like I tend to recommend this book a lot for people that, well, I haven't seen the movie also, that want to get back to reading because it's a very easy book to go through. It's very fast-paced, but you're following this man who is left for dead on Mars, and he has to try and survive just with his wit, which is one of my favorite premises. And there's a lot of humor. Some people hated it. I personally was fine with it. And again, that first sentence definitely sets the tone. So very easy sci-fi to get through. I definitely recommend that one. But again, I feel like most people have seen the movie, still think it's worth it. But just wanted to mention it because also definitely a book that made me want to do this video. The next book I wanted to talk about is a popular YA fantasy series. I feel like on Booktube people kind of disagree if it's YA or adult. I personally think it's more YA, but 6 of Crows by Leigh Bardugo. I feel like I'm gonna mispronounce this name, but whatever. Juice had 2 problems, the moon and his mustache. In this book, you're following a crew trying to pull off a very difficult heist. I personally really love the world for the magic system, which, again, this is the unpopular opinion. Some people say you can skip ahead and not read the Grisha trilogy before reading this series. I disagree. I feel like you will not understand the magic system if you don't read it. At least read the first book in that trilogy. And then I feel like it could have been used a little bit more in here, but I highly recommend it to anyone that likes to read character-driven stories, because even though there's a heist, so there's definitely a lot of action, I feel like people that do tend to love it are definitely the people that get very attached to the characters, which again, I think was the best part in this duology. So wanted to quickly give it a shout out because the first sentence really intrigued me, but I feel like a lot of people already know about it on Booktube, so let's skip to the next book. Let's go with one book that I haven't read yet, because why not? I wanted to talk about The Rook by Danielle O'Malley. Dear you, the body you are wearing used to be mine. I 100% bought this book because of the first sentence. 100%. I feel like if you want to really intrigue me, this is the best way to do it. Clearly, I have yet to read it, so... But I think that's definitely on me and my ridiculous TBR. It actually became a duology. It was a standalone when I did buy it, so I don't know if it's going to be a good idea or not. From what I know, you're following an agent that left themselves a letter to try and figure out who murdered them, and they wake up with a bunch of bodies wearing latex gloves, which... yeah, intriguing for sure. So I am definitely looking forward to reading this book, which, again, one day I will get down to it because ridiculous TBR, which is a good thing though. I feel like sometimes people are like, oh, I'm overwhelmed with all the books I want to read. It's a good thing. You don't want to have like nothing else to read. That would be depressing. So looking forward to reading this eventually, and look at that spine. The next book is kind of in between a sci-fi and a fantasy book, which is probably why I loved it so much. And it is The Fifth Season by N.K. Jemisin, the first book in the Broken Earth trilogy. I have read the whole trilogy. They're actually right there. They're fantastic. They're kind of hard to read just because of the writing style. A lot of it is also written at the second person, so you, which gets kind of confusing, but will make sense eventually. In this world, the magic system is really great. There's some actually great representation also, and it's kind of also post-apocalyptic. It's just a weird but very, very interesting and unique world. And the first sentence, which I should have started with. Let's start with the end of the world. Why don't we? Come on, does that not make you want to read it? So yes, absolutely adore this series. I feel like it's well known, but not that much on Booktube. I believe every book won the Hugo Award, so you know, it's something. Definitely would recommend this series if you are into more unique fantasy books. I actually need to read more by her. I do have two like combined edition of like two other series. So eventually, once again, I will get to them. Let's go one more book that I haven't read yet. I have been meaning to read that one for years, really. What are you focusing on? Hopefully it hasn't been doing this. It was focusing on the Martian. That's another reason I don't like when there are people on my covers. So one book that I've been meaning to read for like 2 years, I think. It was in my goal of reading big books that year and never got around to reading it. And it is Seven Eves by Neil Stevenson. The first sentence, this is a hard sci-fi. And the first sentence, again, 100% the reason I bought this book. The moon blew up without warning and for no apparent reason. Yeah. Obviously, I want to read this now. I believe this book is written in 3 different parts, but the first part is, you know, the moon blowing up and humanity trying to survive. So I need to read this. I absolutely adore hard sci-fi. So again, one day I will get around to reading it and figure out what it is about, but very intrigued. I feel like I've read a lot of books that the moon has something to do with it. I think it's like the third one. Let's talk about this one because book 2, I believe, came out earlier this month, so might as well. And it is An Absolutely Remarkable Thing by Hank Green. This one is really long, bear with me. Look, I am aware that you're here for an epic tale of intrigue and mystery and adventure and near death and actual death. But in order to get to that, unless you want to skip to chapter 13, I'm not your boss. You're going to have to deal with the fact that I, April May, in addition to being one of the most important things that's ever happened to the human race, I'm also a woman in her 20s who has made some mistakes. This one is a first contact with aliens, which is one of my favorite premises, but it's also more accessible than a lot of the ones that I read because you're following a character who is not only in her 20s, but she's also a YouTuber, becomes YouTube famous overnight because she, again, first contact with aliens. But she's portrayed as a flawed character, and I feel like it almost feels a little contemporary at times. So again, that's kind of why I feel like it's more accessible to readers on Booktube that tend to read, I feel like, more contemporaries than sci-fi. And again, book 2 is coming out this month, so I will be reading it ASAP. But this was one of my most surprising reads, I believe, of last year. Really fantastic. Definitely recommend it. Definitely more action-packed than I expected. So yes, definitely a great first sentence too. Last book that I haven't read yet, but wanted to talk about the first sentence is The Knife of Never Letting Go by Patrick Ness. Patrick Ness makes some really fantastic books. I feel like his writing is usually really great. This one, first sentence is, the first thing you find out when your dog learns to talk is that dogs don't got anything much to say. dog in a book is already a good way to make me want to read it, but a talking dog? Yes, for sure. I had actually wanted to read this book also because it was becoming a movie last year, but it has been pushed back to this year. But then with the pandemic, I'm not sure what's gonna happen. The only reason I actually never got around to reading it is because it was recommended to me to read it as an audiobook. And I think it was because people were telling me the way it was written, maybe, which English not being my first language, I think it might be the best solution for me. So I'll look into that for sure. But yes, you follow main character who is a teenage boy. He lives in a village with a bunch of different men, and they can hear everyone's thoughts. But one day he meets a girl and he can't hear what she's thinking, so things happen. Definitely very intrigued. And again, there's a dog that he can hear the thoughts of. Like, of course I want to read this. The next book is kind of in between a contemporary and a sci-fi. I feel like people say sci-fi, but I think it's a contemporary. So, We Are the Ents by Sean David Hutchinson. The first sentence is, life is bullshit. Clearly I have a thing for these kind of statements, but if you're looking for again, YA contemporary with a pretty angsty main character, I feel like this would definitely be up your alley. I don't really tend to read them as often as before. Obviously, I'm a little bit older, but I did really enjoy that one. I think that it will definitely play with your emotions a little bit, which is kind of the goal. Personally, I feel like between a lot of popular ones on Booktube, it's definitely one of my favorite ones, so I definitely highly recommend this one. I personally really enjoyed it, / again, the first sentence. Last but not least, I wanted to talk about a book that I don't hear anyone mention on Booktube, / I really wanted to just rave about the author because she writes really morally gray female characters, which I feel like we need more of, and The Grown Up by Gillian Flynn. We all know her from Gone Girl, but also Sharp Objects, which if you haven't read that book / seen the TV show, I highly recommend you do so. But yes, the first sentence in this book is just, I didn't stop giving handjob because I wasn't good at it. Let's continue just for fun. I stopped giving handjobs because I was the best at it. To be completely honest, this is my least favorite book by her, but again, that first sentence is just... this is the weirdest book by her. It's kind of like a hunted kind of story. Actually, in the back it says, you like ghost stories? And I do recommend you check it out because once again, morally gray female characters. I feel like it's very different from a lot of the like mystery thrillers I read about. I feel like too often, I've been complaining about it, the whole like domestic thrillers, like you're following moms with like cheating husbands, the other woman, kids, and I'm just so bored by them all being unreliable, comatose alcoholics. Like no. And I feel like it's not the case with her female characters. And I feel like Gillian Flynn tends to write characters that are like the actual better version of that. And yeah, recommend all of her books, but I really wanted to mention this one because again, that first sentence, which is the point of this video. And it's also a reminder to myself to actually finish Gone Girl because it's the only book by her I have not read yet. Because I made the mistake of watching the movie before reading the book and I just stop at like page 50. So hopefully this year I'll get around to finally doing it. But yes, I'm hoping she will write more books, but so far this is the one with the best first sentence for sure. I hope you enjoyed this video. I feel like it's a different way to start recommending more books that I have read or not yet. Let me know in the comment section actually if you have any books that you love the first sentence of, especially if it's not a really well-known one. Also let me know if you would like to see more. I can definitely do that. Thumbs up, subscribe. I will be putting more videos on the screen that I recommend you check out, and I shall see you in my next video very soon. Bye.